So, hello students, this is Ashutosh Behra and this is the 11th class of live NPTEL TA sessions for the course Forests and Their Management. Okay, so I hope all of you will join soon and call in others or your friends who are enrolled for this course, either for audit or for the examination. So, we are currently at week 11 of this course and one more week to go to finish up this course. So in week 11 we are learning about conservation. This course is taught by Professor Ankur Avadia at IIT Kanpur and my name is Ashutosh. I'm a PMRF TA scholar for this course at Forest and Their Management. So if you have attended my previous classes, you know the kind of format that we are going to follow. We have dealt with lecture week 1 to lecture week 10 in the previous weeks, and today is the turn for lecture week 11, where Professor Ankur Avadia has covered three lectures in the module of conservation, especially the wildlife conservation and other topics. So we'll be discussing some of the example questions or previous year assignment URL questions so that we get familiarized with the kind of questions we are going to face in our own quizzes and in the upcoming examination. So this live TA session is also for clearing your doubts regarding the recorded lecture series from Forest and Their Management. So along with me, there is a second TA scholar from IISc, Ms. Kritika, who also conducts their own live sessions for this course, Forest and Their Management. So this is the platform for students. You have to interact with me. You have to tell me what are your answers, what are your doubts, whether you could understand the topic or not. I'll try my best to cover the topics in the questions mentioned and whatever we are dealing with. So we have lined up 10 multiple choice questions for this session, out of which one option is correct, and you have to tell me which is the correct answer. And later I'll reveal what is the correct answer, and then we will understand very briefly what is the concept or topic behind this rationale. Okay, so let us allow for 5 more minutes for all the students to join this session so that we can have a fruitful session. General instructions for everyone who is joining this live class. The call is open to everyone. This is the recorded session. So whatever I'll be teaching and whatever the interaction and classes we are going to have, this is going to be recorded and uploaded on YouTube, the link to which will be provided through NPTEL. Also the materials and the slide presentations that I'm going to share with you guys, going to show in this class as well as share with you guys, is going to be shared to you through NPTEL in the Google slide format. So you will get those example questions, you will get these recorded lectures. All you have to do is make the most out of it, make the maximum benefit out of it, ask questions, give answers and interact with me via the chat box. So general instruction for all the students, please turn off your mic and video chat during the class so that let me be the only one who is presenting and talking. For the smooth conduction of this session, you can communicate with me through the chat box. Okay, let us wait for 5 more minutes for people to join. This class will be roughly 1 to 1.5 hours of a class, depending on what time we take or how much time we take on each question around. Okay, let's start sharp after 5 minutes. I'll also mention it in the comment box. Okay, guys, I think it's time for us to start the class. So, I welcome you all again to this live TA session for Forest Under Management, where we'll be dealing with week 11 lectures from this course module, where Professor Ankur Avadhya has taught about conservation. We will understand different concepts of conservation and how look at what kind of questions we can get in our quizzes as well as the examination. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll present my slides and you can interact with me via the chat box. If you have any question or any answer, please write it in the comment box. I am monitoring the comment box very closely. And the format will be the usual. We have 10 multiple choice questions which we will deal with one by one and then understand what is the concept behind these questions. Okay, let me share my slides. So I hope everyone can see my slides and also see the slides moving. Is my voice audible and clear to understand? If yes, then we'll move ahead. Please respond with a like or a yes in the comment box. Very good. So all those who will be watching these lectures as well as the students who have joined the live class, my name is Ashutosh Behra. I'm a PMRF scholar at IIT Kanpur and we are today dealing with week 11 of Forest and their management. This has 3 modules where Professor Ankur Avadhya is teaching us about conservation. Course code is NOC 26 BT23. So coming ahead are 10 multiple choice questions which we will deal one by one. And then you have to tell me what is the correct answer of this question. You can write your answers in the comment box or the chat box. I will monitor them closely and in 30 seconds to 1 minute, I will tell you what is the correct answer. And we'll match your answers to the correct answer. Then we will understand why the correct answer is the correct answer. Okay, fine, easy to understand. Let us start with the first question. Question number 1. Planting along canal banks is a part of dash. Planting along canal banks is a part of dash. Option A, farm forestry. Option B, community forestry. Option C, extension forestry. Option D, agroforestry. What do you think will come under the category of planting along canal banks? Canal banks. Write your answer in the chat box and then I will tell you what is the correct answer. If you remember, Professor Ankur Avadhya in his first module of lecture has explained this very nicely. Different forms of forestry that can be done in addition to the silvicultural method of forestry that we just understood in the previous lectures. Planting along canal banks. There is a water canal or a river and you are planting trees along the canal banks. What kind of forestry is this? Let us check the chat box. Aryan says option D. Okay. Any more answers or should we move ahead? Okay. Let us see what is the correct answer to this question. Planting along canal banks is a part of option C, extension forestry. This is the correct answer. It's not farm forestry, community or agroforestry, but extension forestry. So option C is correct answer. I'm sorry, Aryan. D is not the correct answer, but you will get more chances to get your answer correct in the upcoming questions. Let us understand all these terms. What are the definitions? What are the examples and types of different kinds of forestry that we are looking at here? So here is an example, beautiful canal, and there are trees planted alongside the canal, and this is an example of extension forestry. So if I just, which is a component of social forestry in India. So all these types of forestry that we are discussing about is the social forestry. Social forestry includes all these types of forestry, where we have farm forestry. Now what does farm forestry say? You must have seen large farms or plantations, trees of one or two kinds like fruit orchards or sandalwood plantations. These can be a good example of farm forestry, which of course has a social benefit. Then comes what was the other option? Community forestry. Community forestry, so community forestry is done in community owned lands. So there are certain common community owned lands like grasslands, or grazing grounds. And if you do forestry here, of course for the benefit of the local community which owns this land, this is called community forestry. Now comes extension forestry, which means, as we see in this definition, planting trees on public lands such as roadside, railway lines and canal banks to extend the forest area outside traditional forest zones, providing fuel, fodder and reducing soil erosion. So extension forestry here is taking the traditional forestry out of the traditional forest. So if you plant outside of areas of the traditional forest along railway lines, let's say you have a railway track, you're planting trees here because there are always empty areas near the railway tracks, or of let's say a canal or roadways like this. If you plant trees here, this is known as extension forestry, since you're conventionally taking the trees out of a forest area. It's not the extension of the forest area. Now what is known as a forest, now you have similar trees or plantations alongside railway tracks, canals and roads, and these always serve a purpose of providing fuel, reduce soil erosion, which is seen as in the canal banks. So if there are trees in the canal banks, these trees will hold on to the soil here and will prevent the soil erosion. So it is benefiting the public or the environment. But these trees are not a part of the forest, these are an extension of the forest. And then we have agroforestry, where farmers grow silvicultural trees along with their crops for maybe the non-timber forest produce or for shade. So crops plus trees. This is agroforestry. So these are some of the very good examples of social forestry that we encountered, but planting along canal banks is an example of extension forestry. It involves planting trees on public roads or lands such as roads, railway lines and canal banks to extend the forest area outside traditional forest zones, providing fuel, fodder and reducing soil erosion. So again, the reiteration of social forestry in India, introduced in 1976, which promotes community managed afforestation and non-forest degraded lands to meet rural needs of fuel, fodder, timber, reducing pressure on natural forests. Now, what is this form of social forestry? What is this form of forestry? It is where the not only the government but the societies or the communities are involved in managing the forest and managing things like afforestation of the non-forest or degraded lands. Now, such a practice can increase the production of forest or timber from a degraded land and change the landscape forever, and which will reduce the pressure on the natural forest as well as reduce the pressure on the government for management of these forests. It involves farm, community, and extension forestry, while the Indian Forest Act 1927 focuses on state control classification of these and regulation. Subsequent policies like the National Forest Policy 1988 integrated participatory approaches to empower local communities in these sustainable efforts. So what Indian government realized is by segregating the people or the communities from the forest management strategies, they are committing a major mistake, and thus which led to an integration of the local community and the providers who are the sole protector of these forests to come forward and manage these forests according to their needs and for regeneration of the forest. Key aspects of social forestry. Objective is to meet the 5 F's: food, fuel, fodder, fertilizer, and fiber for rural population, decreasing the dependence on the traditional forest and to restore ecological balance. And then these are the types of social forestry which I just explained. Farm forestry, farmers growing trees on their farms to meet the market and the household needs. Community forestry, village communities manage trees on the community owned land. Extension forestry, planting on an uncultivated roadside or river banks. And these are some of the real time initiatives that are an example of social forestry. Projects including the National Afforestation Program now merge with the National Mission for a Green India GIM and Nagar Van Yojana. So this is a picture of social forestry in India, and the answer to our question was planting trees alongside river canals or canal banks is a form of extension forestry. Is it clear to everyone? Is it clear to the students? If yes, then let me know with a like or a yes in the chat box, and we will move ahead to the next question. Very good. Okay, let's look at question number 2. Question number 2 says, captive breeding is an example of dash. Okay, what kind of conservation is a captive breeding? Is it a conservation? Is it a preservation? What is an example of? Option A, in situ conservation. Option B, ex situ conservation. Option C, in situ preservation, or option D, ex situ preservation. I hope you understand the terminology. We are talking about captive breeding. Post your answers in the comment box, whatever you think is the correct answer. Captive breeding. Okay, let's check the chat box for answers. Kavita says option C. Okay. Now let us look at what is the correct answer to this question. Captive breeding is an example of option B, ex situ conservation. Captive breeding is an ex situ conservation prototype. It's not in situ conservation because you are capturing the animal and breeding it at a place other than its natural habitat. It's not in situ preservation. It's definitely not in situ, but it's an ex situ, and this is a conservation method. In preservation, you actually preserve the natural habitat. So let us first understand the major or basic difference between a conservation and a preservation practice. And here we go. Captive breeding is the process of breeding rare or endangered species in controlled environments such as zoos, specialized facilities, and wildlife reserves to prevent extinction of the animal. For example, the giant panda. The giant panda is a flagship species, and it is captively bred in research centers and zoos in China. And this is because these pandas are endangered and rare. They are not available in all parts of the world. They are only available in China. And they cannot, to ensure their success rate, to ensure their propagation, they provide, humans provide, intervention is required. They capture these animals inside zoos and then do an artificial or breeding process inside the zoo to ensure maximum or sure shot mating and progeny survival. It aims to increase the population numbers, maintaining the genetic diversity, and eventually reintroduce animals into the wild to restore natural populations. So, whatever success rate of mating and population propagation we face in the natural scenario, that will be 2 or 3 fold increased when we do it inside captivity, and then eventually increasing the population to reintroduce these animals into wild and restore the natural populations. For example, captive breeding of the critically endangered gharial in India, particularly at centers like Kukrel Gharial's Research Center at Lucknow and Nandankanan Zoological Park in Odisha, has been highly successful since the 1970s. So these are the endangered Indian river crocodiles, which are called gharial or thin-snouted crocodile. These are endangered, and thus most of the breeding of the gharial is done in captive breeding method, which is a system of ex situ conservation. The process involves head starting, collecting the wild eggs, hatching them, and raising juveniles for 3 to 5 years before releasing them to boost wild populations, with over 800 plus released as of 2022. You can see how this method is effective. You take the eggs, you incubate them, you hatch them, and you rear the juveniles for 3 to 5 periods with human intervention, and then release them back into the water or the wild. Now, captive breeding is classified as ex situ conservation because organisms are conserved outside their natural habitat. So, a zoo or a research station is not some natural habitat for the gharial or for the pandas, but the captive breeding, the breeding mechanism is, or the breeding is promoted here in the place which is outside their natural habitat. That is why captive breeding is classified as ex situ conservation. Now, is it clear to the students why captive breeding is an ex situ conservation? We learnt with an example of the Indian gharial and the giant panda from the China. Is it clear to the students? If yes, then let me know in the chat box, and we will move forward with the next question. Very good. Thanks, Kavita. Let's look at question number 3. Question number 3 is a statement based question. The tiger has a home range of several square kilometers, regulates the ecosystem through controlling herbivore populations and trophic cascades, and people come to tiger reserves to watch tigers, obviously. Thus, the tiger can be called as dash. So, this is a species classification question. Here, the question subject of interest is a tiger, which has a home range of several square kilometers, regulates the ecosystem by controlling herbivore populations and trophic cascades, and people are also fond of the tiger, come to tiger reserves to watch the tigers. Thus, the tiger can be called as option A, umbrella species, option B, keystone species, option C, flagship species, option D, all of the above. Now you have to remember the definitions of these terms. What is an umbrella species? What is a keystone species? What is a flagship species? To easily classify this animal, which is tiger, into one of these categories. Write your answers in the chat box and I will monitor them closely in a minute or so. Whether tiger is an umbrella species, a keystone species, or a flagship species, or all of the above. Okay, let's look back at this question. Let's first check the comment box if there are any answers. Kavita and Shreyashi have both answered D. Okay, let us see. The tiger, which has a home range of several square kilometers, regulating the ecosystem, as well as people who come to watch the tigers. Thus, this kind of a species is called all of the above. D is the correct option. The tiger is an umbrella species. The tiger is also a keystone species. Tiger is also a flagship species. Very good. Kavita and Shreyasi have all correct answers. Now let us understand each term by definition. What is an umbrella species? What is a keystone species? And what is a flagship species? And tiger being all three of them makes it so more important for conservation. Now tiger is a keystone species because their presence shapes forest health, movement patterns and ecosystem balance. Now a keystone species maintains ecosystem balance as a top predator. Now how does it do? Let us just see here. Now in a food chain, whenever there are plants, the plants are eaten up by herbivores. Which can be a deer, okay. So this is eaten by the herbivores. Now if herbivore population goes up, then the plants of the forest will die out. So thus to keep the population of herbivores in check, you need to introduce a top predator, which is a tiger. Therefore, tiger is a keystone species which regulates the herbivore population, in turn regulating the plant growth. Thus, if you want a forest to thrive and survive for the species and biodiversity, so tiger is a keystone species which shapes the forest health, movement patterns and ecosystem balance. That is why it is a keystone species. If we draw tiger here, that is why tiger is a keystone species. Now, tiger is also an umbrella species. Now, why do we say that? Tiger is an umbrella species because its conservation protects many other species. Tiger needs a large area for its conservation because tiger generally moves through a big area for their food and predation, around 60 to 80 kilometers square. Now, if you want to protect the tiger, you have to make conservation efforts for the whole 60 to 80 square kilometer of area, and thus you also cover up and protect all those species staying in the 60 to 80 kilometer area. That is why tiger is also known as an umbrella species. So in an effort to protect the tiger, you automatically protect many other species which come under its habitat. Okay, so that is why tiger is also an umbrella species because its conservation protects many other species. It is a keystone species because it maintains ecosystem balance as a top predator, and it is also known as a flagship species because it represents and promotes wildlife conservation. People or the public have emotional connect with the tigers, and it is an ambassador, a species selected to act as an ambassador, icon or a symbol for a defined habitat, issue and campaign or environmental cause. People actively donate to save the tigers. People enjoy watching these tigers. They are majestic, they are beautiful, and people want to emotionally save these tigers. That's why it is a representative animal or a flagship species animal of importance. And along with being a flagship species, the tiger is also a keystone species and an umbrella species, making it the most important species for conservation. Now, looking at the South Asian scenario, or including India, saving tigers, what are the unseen benefits of saving these tigers? Saving the wild tiger can help to protect thousands of species and create value for millions of peoples in Asia. So not only India, saving tigers not only immediately just benefits the tigers, but also can produce a value for millions of peoples to Asia, because tigers are the forest guardians. The presence and promise of tigers motivates government to help protect Asia's forest. 100% of Sumatran rhinos and orangutan and 31% of Asian elephants live within the tiger's range. So this is what we meant when we say that tiger is an umbrella species. So for protection of the tiger, you also automatically protect orangutans and rhinos and many other endangered species. Tigers also help fight climate change. Remaining tiger habitats harbor forests that are critical for storing and absorbing carbon and mitigating climate change, and helping 10 natural world heritage sites, more than 22 million hectares of key biodiversity area where tigers roam are protected, and protecting other endangered species. And not to mention tigers draw a lot of revenue and impact on the tourism of a state and the conservation areas, because many of the people take wildlife safaris, take tickets to the zoos and biodiversity hotspots to just get a glimpse of the tigers. That is why tiger, along with being an umbrella species, is a keystone species by regulating herbivore population, and also a flagship species which is important for conservation. Is it clear to the students? If yes, then let me know with the chat box. Very good. Very good. Okay. Moving on to the next question. Question number 4. Sustainable harvest of resources falls under the category of dash. This can be an easy question. Sustainable harvest of resources falls under the category of dash. Option A, conservation. Option B, preservation. Option C, environmentalism. Option D, none of the above. Understood the question? Post your answers in the chat box. When you sustainably harvest resources in a system so that it regenerates later on and keep providing you with the resources, what is this method called? Okay, let's come back to this question. Let's check the answers in the comment box. If any, Kavita and Shreyashi say A. Okay. Let's find out what is the correct answer to this question. Sustainable harvest of resources falls under the category of conservation. Option A is the correct answer. Well done. Shreyashi and Kavita's answers are correct. Now let us understand what is conservation versus what is preservation, what is environmentalism, and what do these terms exactly mean. So conservation is a process where we use nature's energy wisely, while preservation is protecting nature from any kind of use. Both aims to save the wildlife, one goal and two strategies. Conservation generally means the protection, preservation and sustainable management of natural resources so they remain available for future generations. You also derive a benefit out of the forest and the wildlife, but also help it regenerate so that they remain available for future generations. It's not directly protecting the nature from use, but using nature in sustainable and wise manner. That is called conservation. So an example of conservation. Conservation involves the protection and wise use of natural resources, while sustainable harvesting ensures that resources are utilized at a rate that allows their natural regeneration, such as short rotation cycle forestry, where you clear fell or selectively fell the trees for timber and you let the trees grow. Remove the weak trees and allow for years of growth for seedling to be planted, and then clear cut again in a way of regenerating the forest and also harvesting the forest for timber use. And here we also see an example of sustainable harvest done by the local communities in the forest in methods of conservation and felling of trees or regeneration of trees, felling and timber collection, while regeneration of saplings in a forest in silvicultural management. So therefore these are all good examples of conservation, and which involves not only the protection but wise use of natural resources to regenerate the resources for the upcoming generations. I hope it is clear to the students. This is an easy concept to understand. Conservation means using the nature wisely, while preservation means protecting the nature from use. If you understood, then let me know with a yes or a like and we can move ahead. Very good. Looking at question number 5. Again, this is an example. The elephant has a home range of several square kilometers. regulates the ecosystem by its habit of destructive feeding, and people can relate to this animal which is of important for conservation. Given this background, the elephant can be called as which kind of species? Option A, umbrella species. Option B, keystone species. Option C, flagship species. Option D, all of the above. Read the question carefully. These are some of the traits of the animal in discussion, which is the elephant, having a home range of several square kilometers. It regulates the ecosystem by destructive feeding, and people also relate to this animal and think this is important for conservation. What kind of animal or species is this elephant? Okay, I think that's enough time for this question. Let's come back, visit this question. Let me check the answers in the comment box. Shreyashi says option D. Okay. Let us look at what is the correct answer to this question. The elephant, which has a home range of several square kilometers, regulates the ecosystem by its habit of destructive feeding, and people can relate to this animal, which is important for conservation. Given this background, the elephant can be called as all of the above. The elephant can be called as umbrella species. The elephant can also be called as a keystone species and definitely a flagship species. So Shreyasi's answer is correct. Very good. So let us understand this again in detail, as we also saw in the earlier question with the tiger example. This is an elephant's example. So first point, elephants being an umbrella species. What do I mean by umbrella species? Elephants are considered umbrella species because their massive habitat needs up to 15,000 square kilometers, necessitate protecting vast connected ecosystems. Now elephants are group animals and they move in herds. They also displace during their feeding season depending on the reproductive season and vice versa. By conserving these spaces for elephants, so you need to conserve a large space for elephant to protect an elephant. Countless other plants and animal species within that range are automatically protected or indirectly protected. Now if you protect such a large range for protection of the elephants, automatically many plant species and other animal species which lie in that range also get protected. That is why elephants are considered to be the umbrella species, covering all other different animals like the giraffe, the cheetahs, hippos and other birds and storks. They act as vital ecological engineers, maintaining the biodiversity and creating habitats for other animals. And if you look at an elephant, it is so majestic. People also just visit safaris and rides to take a glimpse at the elephant in the natural habitat. The elephant is considered a flagship species because it is a charismatic animal used to promote conservation awareness and protect entire ecosystems through public support. So flagship species is a species or an animal which can gather a lot of public support and public admiration. So people relate emotionally to the elephant very much, and also has a spiritual and religious significance in countries like India, where elephants are considered the gatekeepers of of heaven, and elephants are considered as deities, as the elders of the forest and giant guardians. So thus elephants have a spiritual and a religious significance, which also elevate their status as a flagship species. Now elephants as ecosystem engineers, or how they act as a keystone species because they affect the ecosystem, they help in regulating the ecosystem. Now ecosystem engineers, not just a keystone species, but they are called ecosystem engineers. Why so? Ecosystem engineers are animals that create, modify, or destroy a habitat. They are important for maintaining the health and stability of the environment which they are living in. So even destruction of habitats by the elephants is a marvel of an ecosystem engineering. Now keystone species is an organism that helps hold the system together and is vital for its ecosystem. Like elephants are a keystone species, and elephants are a species with a large effect on the environment, like gazelles, zebras, and the giraffes. Many other species depend on the keystone species. Removing a keystone species from a major ecosystem will result in severe imbalance in the entire system. And studies shows that elephants are the gardeners, contractors, roads, and the overall balancers in the ecosystem. How? Elephants feed in a style called the destructive feeding habitat, or pushing trees and vegetation, throwing them down. Elephants pushing over trees can help to maintain savanna ecosystems. This also helps create new paths to allow smaller animals to move more freely. So large trees, when pushed down, promote a savanna ecosystem or a grassland kind of ecosystem in which many other predators and animals are affected, like the cheetah, lions, and other animals which prefer a savanna or a grassland system. So elephants' destructive feeding habitat actually engineers the forest into a savanna system. This also allows more light to the floor, creating opportunities for other plants to flourish. Pruning trees also helps improve growth and offer food. So thereby elephant is not only uh, an umbrella species, it's also a flagship species and is definitely a keystone species. That too, elephants are considered as ecosystem engineers with their habit of pushing feeding or destructive feeding habitats. I hope it is clear to the students. Very good. Okay. Let us move ahead to the next question. Question number 6. People come to Sesa Orchid Sanctuary in Arunachal Pradesh to witness orchids, which in the context would be classified as dash. Understood the question? People coming to the Sesa Orchid Sanctuary in Arunachal Pradesh just to see the orchids or witness the bloom of orchids, which in this context would be classified as which species? Option A, umbrella species. Option B, keystone species. Option C, flagship species. Or option D, extinct species. Now you tell me which kind of species should be an orchid in the Sesa Orchid Sanctuary, where people visit this sanctuary to take a look at these orchids. Okay, let's come back to this question and see what are the answers in the chat box. Sureshi says option C, and Sindhu has answered flagship species. Now let us look at what is the correct answer to this question. People coming to Sesa Orchid Sanctuary in Arunachal Pradesh to witness orchids in this context would be classified correctly as a flagship species. Option C or flagship species is the correct answer. Well done. Sindhu and Shreyasi, you have the correct answers. Again, reiterating the fact which we have dealt in other questions as well. What is a flagship species? A flagship species is a charismatic, well-known animal or a plant selected to act as an ambassador, symbol or icon for a defined habitat, issue or conservation campaign. Any animal or plant here in case which is the orchid plant, which is charismatic, very charismatic, because the flowers, orchid flowers, are so beautiful, and orchid flowers are not found in many regions of India, only endemic or only found in the hilly regions of the India's in the Himalayan regions. Now such a species or like the orchid flower is well known, it's well appreciated. People come from far away just to watch these species, just to look at these species. It is an ambassador or a symbol species for Arunachal Pradesh, for the Sesha Orchid Sanctuary. By focusing on these often charismatic species, conservationists aim to raise awareness, funds, and protective measures that ultimately benefit many other less charismatic species sharing the same ecosystem. So just in case, if you look at this example of Sesha Orchid Sanctuary, not only the orchids that are protected in this sanctuary, it also protects many other less charismatic species in the process of conserving the Sesa orchids, right? And here on my right are some examples of well-known flagship species like the orangutan found in the Sumatran and Borneo equatorial rainforest, polar bear for the Arctic Circle and melting ice campaigns, the butterflies, tiger in Royal Bengal tiger is a flagship species, and very rare kinds of frogs and snakes as well as plant species. These are all an example of charismatic species or flagship species. Now in the Sesa Orchid Sanctuary, this is the India's only orchid sanctuary nestled in the Himalayan foothills in Bhalukpong Forest Division of West Kameng District, Arunachal Pradesh. It is present in the Bhalukpong Forest Division. It is the only orchid sanctuary nestled in India, in the Himalayan foothills. And just look at these flowers, orchid flowers, very beautiful, remarkable shape and petal arrangements, which attracts a lot of people and visitors and wildlife photographers from afar to visit these sanctuaries when in season. So people visiting the sanctuary specifically to see orchids, meaning the orchids are being used to attract visitors, generate awareness about these species as well as all the other dependent species in and around the area, and promote conservation of this area. This is exactly the role of a flagship species. I think it is easy to understand what is a flagship species. We have discussed at length from 2 to 3 questions that what is a flagship species, what is a keystone species, and what is a umbrella species. Is it clear to the students? Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question number 7. We prefer those areas for creation of a conservation reserve where the level of threat is dash. So based on the threat triage, which are the areas that are suitable for creation of a conservation reserve? Option A, very high threat. Option B, medium threat. Option C, very low threat. Or option D, non-existent threat. By threat here, I mean threat to species in that area as well as threat to the area, the biodiversity and the geographical constitution of this area. Okay, I think we should look back at this question for what is the threat level or triage that we can consider or prefer those areas for creation of a conservation reserve. Let us see what are the answers in the comment box. Sindhu says very high. Shreshio is also going with option A, very high. Okay, let us look at what is the correct answer. We prefer those areas for the creation of a conservation reserve where the level of the threat is option B, medium. It is not very high, it is not very low, and if the threat is non-existent, there is not even the need for creating a conservation reserve. The areas, it might surprise you, the areas with medium threat are the areas which are preferred for creation of a conservation reserve. Now let us understand this in detail so that we do not commit this mistake in the quiz or in the final exam. Areas under medium threat are optimal for conservation reserves because they offer a balance between high biodiversity value and feasibility of protection. So you have to take this into consideration. What is the feasibility of protection? अगर आप उस जगह को बचाने भी जाओ तो कितना परसेंटेज आप बचा सकते हो? What is the ratio of species you can actually save? Those areas with already very high threat to the level of biodiversity, it is almost a gone case. आप वहाँ जाके कुछ भी नहीं बचा सकते. आपका efforts उनको नहीं बचा सकता because there is already a heavy biodiversity loss. There is very high threat to that area. So that area is not suitable for a creation of a biosphere reserve or a national park based on the economic value, and because the efforts that you will put in will not save much animals unless the species is a very important species like the tiger or the elephant. So that is why mostly medium threat areas are selected for conservation. If there is very low, the species threat is very low, then that is not the point of concern right now. We can check it later. But the areas with medium intensity of level threat are considered generally for the creation of a biosphere reserve or a national park. So high biodiversity value, check. Feasibility of protection, allowing for proactive management before damage becomes irreversible. So in the very high threat category, damage is already irreversible, so you do not want to set up a wildlife sanctuary there. These areas in the medium threat areas act as a crucial cost-effective buffers for endangered species, often supporting wildlife corridors and satellite habitats that reduce pressure on core highly threatened zones. So you see the purpose of building a wildlife sanctuary in the medium threat area. It can serve as a wildlife corridor and satellite habitats to reduce the pressure on the highly threatened zones. So that is why you create the sanctuary around the highly threatened zone in a medium threat area. So what are the factors we need to consider while designing our sanctuary? What is the urgency of saving? If there is a very high threat, whether there is a medium threat or there is a low threat, biodiversity condition which is degraded in the high threat area, fairly intact in the moderate threat and almost intact in the low threat. Cost of protection is high, moderate threat protection is moderate, while feasibility is moderate, and conservation impact is the most in moderate threat because it will cause a preventive effect as well as a long-term effect on the wildlife sanctuary or on the species. Moderate threat areas are generally preferred for national park selection due to their balance of biodiversity value and feasibility, while high threat areas are chosen for urgent conservation and low threat areas for long-term preservation. So already in areas which are high threat, you might consider ex situ conservation practices rather than an in situ national park or a wildlife sanctuary practice. Low threat areas for long-term preservation. So if you now understand the zones of a biosphere reserve and how it is done, we can then understand this much better. In the core is the highly endangered or protected area where we have the biodiversity. Out of this core zone, we have the buffer zone where we have tourism, human settlements and monitoring actively by the forest rangers or the forest officials and the wildlife protection communities. While research and education also goes on in the buffer zone but does not touch the core zone where the threat is medium, and there is a transition zone where you have more human settlements, research and biodiversity, research and tourism and education, where there is lesser biodiversity and impact on the endangered species. So these are some of the zones of the biosphere reserves, and a medium threat level is considered optimal for choosing the area for building biosphere reserves. I hope it is clear to the students. Not an area with very high species threat level, but an area with a medium species threat level is chosen for biosphere reserves or a national park. If it's clear to you or you have any questions, then please ask me in the comment box, or we can move ahead to the next question. Okay, okay, Shreyasi. Now let us look at the next question, question number 8. Which of these is not a forest classification as per the 1894 forest policy? Which of these is not a forest classification as per the 1894 forest policy? Option A, protection forest. Option B, production forest. Option C, minor forest. Option D, major forest. Which of these is not a forest classification? If you remember the 1894 forest policy drafted by the British government in India. Okay, students, let us come back to this question. Question number 8. Which of these is not a forest classification as per 1894 forest policy? And let us look at it. Who has answered? Sindhu has answered major forest. Shreyashi says major forest. Okay. Let us look at the correct answer. Which of these is not a forest classification? Correct answer is option D, major forest. Again, Shreyasi and Shreyasi has answered correct, as well as Sindhu has also answered correctly. Major forest is the correct answer. Now let us look at what are these different forest classification. According to this policy, the first national forest policy of 1894, formulated by the British colonial government, classified forests on a functional basis to manage resources for state revenue and industrial needs. Right? The four main classifications are protection forest, production forest, minor forest and village forest, which does not include the major forest. Sorry, guys, I was just looking at something else. Coming back to, yes, the four main classifications according to the National Forest Policy of 1894. The first type is the protection forest, forests on hill slopes or catchment areas preserved for physical climatic reasons. So, this is a category of classification of forest that are present on hill slopes or in catchment areas to prevent soil erosion and also to prevent flooding of the valleys downstream. Then comes production forest. Forest aims at producing commercial timber for defense, communications and industrial purposes. Production forests solely aimed for producing timber. Now timber can have multiple uses for defense, communications and industrial purposes. And then comes the minor forests which are grown for local use, often underutilized and with a smaller economic value, mainly for non-timber forest producers, the local honey, fruits and harvest like berries or bamboos, and village forest aimed at supplying fuel, fodder and grazing needs to surrounding local communities. So these are the four categories of the forest, and but not the major forest, which was one of the odd one outs in the options. Let us here have a look at all these different kinds of classes of forest protection, forest classifications by the British Indian government. Protection forest for protecting the valleys and the soil over the mountains. Whenever it rains, these soils will wash off into the valley, cause silting of the dams. So these forests are classified as a protection forest. They are not to be cut for solely for physical, climatic, as well as for reasons for protecting the valleys. Then comes the production forest for utilization of timber. To forests which are planted are grown majorly for extracting timber out of it and use this timber for various other purposes. Minor forest for local use like a bamboo forest, which locals can use for crafts and for fuel wood as well as for fodder. And village forest for fuel wood, again for non-timber forest produce and fuel woods we have minor forest and village forest. So these are the four different types of classifications according to the British style of according to the British policies in 1894 in the colonial government. I hope it is clear to the students. These are the four major types of forest: protection forest, production forest, minor forest and village forest. Okay, thank you thank you Shashi. Let us move ahead to the next question. Question number 9. Science of relationships between organisms and their environments is the definition of dash. Science of relationships between organisms and their environments is the definition of dash. Option A, conservation. Option B, preservation. Option C, environmentalism. Option D, ecology. Let's visit this question again. Question number 9. Let's look at what are the answers in the comment box. Science of relationships between organisms and their environment is the definition of, and Sindhu has answered ecology. Okay. So what is the correct answer to this question? Science of relationships between organisms and their environments is the definition of ecology. Ecology is the correct answer. Well done, Sindhu. Your answer is correct. So ecology is the study of relationships between organisms and their environment and the balances between these relationships. Now, when we talk about organisms and their environment, we have abiotic factors as well as the biotic factors which interact together to give rise to what is a study known as ecology. So, we have biotic factors like insects, plants, microbes, reptiles, mammals, birds, and abiotic factors like the air, which have carbon dioxide, oxygen, sunlight, and water. Interaction of all these and the study of impact on the environment and the balances is the study of ecology. Not much to explain and easy to understand. I hope it is clear to the students. If it is clear, then we can move ahead to the next question. Thanks, Rishi. Coming to the last question of this session. In 1931, one panchayats were constituted in areas that are now in which state? It's a memory based question. In 1931, one panchayats were created and they are now in which state? Option A, Tamil Nadu. Option B, Madhya Pradesh. Option C, West Bengal. Or option D, Uttarakhand. One panchayats, and it is associated with which state? Okay, let's come back to this question and look at what are the answers. In 1931, the one panchayats were constituted, which are now in which state? And what are the answers? Sindhu says option B, but Shreshi says option D. Let us look at what is the correct answer. One panchayats are currently in the state of Uttarakhand. One panchayats are in Uttarakhand right now as well. So option D is the correct answer. Shreyasi has answered correctly. So let us look at what are one panchayats and how do they benefit us. One panchayats are unique community-led forest management councils in Uttarakhand, India, managing up to 14% of the state's forest. You can see the heavy impact these one panchayats are having in the state forest governance. Almost 14% of the state forests are managed by local community guidelines and one panchayats. Established under the 1931 rules, now under the Indian Forest Act of 1927, they allow villagers to conserve, manage and sustainably use local forest with significant roles for women leaders and local forest guards to protect resources. So another ideology that these one panchayats followed is appointment of women leaders, women taking the initiative, community-led initiative for forest management. This is also a joint effort for women empowerment and helping the government in managing the forest and in also deriving the benefits of the timber as well as non-forest timber produce for the local community. That is how a sense of belongingness was developed when one panchayats were set up in Uttarakhand for protection of the forests. So what does this One Panchayats aim to? A sustainable forest conservation. Locals protect forest because they depend on them directly, and preventive over exploitation and illegal logging. Now if the local do not have a sense of belongingness, or they think that this is the government led land, they can take their cattle and do over exploitation or illegal grazing. Encouraging regulated grazing and control fuel wood collection. So if the community itself is the one which is managing the forest, they will ensure their rules and strictness to others for regulation of the grazing as well as fuel wood collection. Economic benefits to the villagers. This kind of one panchayats provide fuel wood, fodder, timber and minor forest produce to the community, directly to the community for selling them in the markets. Reducing household expenses, no need to buy these resources from the government itself, and sometimes generate income through forest products. And community participation and empowerment. Decisions are taken locally by the villagers in the panchayat, promotes democratic governance at grassroots level and increases sense of ownership and responsibility. So this is a great initiative taken by the Indian government to include the local communities and includes the ways of social forestry, creating the one panchayats in Uttarakhand. And it also helps in environmental protection, which helps in soil conservation and prevent erosion, because now the community takes care of their own forests and nearby forests in the one panchayat, which also helps recharge the water table and groundwater, available water sources and watershed stability, and also supports biodiversity conservation and endangered species conservation. So these are all the benefits of the one panchayats which are present in Uttarakhand and mainly led by the local indigenous women community, leading to women empowerment as well as forest management schedules, releasing the pressure on the Indian governments for managing the forests, and these communities also derive major benefits from management of these forests under one panchayat. I hope it is clear to the students. Very good. Okay. So with this question, we have come to the end of our presentation. I will stop my presentation here. Yeah, and come back to the call. Yeah. So with this, we have come to the end of our presentation as well as the class. I hope you guys liked the class. You had all your doubts cleared. I'll try my best to make the concepts clear. We dealt with 10 multiple choice questions and understood what are the concepts and the reasons behind why the correct answer is the correct answer. I also meant to quickly recap the lectures through these questions. I hope it was clear to everyone. If you have any doubts or queries regarding these questions or these lectures as in general, this is the time now. You can post it in the comment box. If you have any suggestions for the way I am presenting or for the way this class is conducted, you can also write to me in the comment box or post it in the NPTEL channel, and I'll look at it through the NPTEL authorities. This is a recorded lecture, and the recordings, as soon as we finish this class, will be made available to you via a YouTube link where I'll upload this video in my channel. And the slide presentations which I was taking this class from will also be shared to you through the Google folder. Okay, so if you guys do not have any questions, then I will end this call for everyone. Thank you for joining, and get ready for next Saturday, where we will deal with lecture week 12. Read your lectures and follow your notes. Try to solve your questions by yourself and try to attend these live TA session classes and derive maximum benefit from it. Sindhu says, thank you, sir. You're welcome. Most welcome, Sindhu. So if you guys have no question, I will end this call. Ask your friends to join in the next class, or anyone who has registered for this course. Nevertheless, whatever the population or the class participation might be, I will be taking this class every day on every week on Saturday 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. So see you next Saturday 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Thank you for joining. I'll end this call for everyone. Bye-bye.